Welcome to the Realizations Podcast. I'm Andrea Gordon, your host, and I'm excited to explore the world of real estate with you. In a world where perceptions often overshadow reality, Realizations seeks to redefine what it means to be a realtor. Join me as we peel back the layers of the industry, uncovering inspiring stories and celebrating the good in real estate. Whether you're a homeowner, a fellow realtor, or simply curious, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Realizations, where perceptions meet reality. Let's dive right in. Hi, welcome everybody to the Realizations Podcast. I'm really excited today because I'm talking with a real estate attorney named Ashley Feuerman, and she's based out of San Diego, California, and we're going to have a little bit of a good time talking about those issues that can come up in both commercial and first-time homebuyer transactions, as well as just a general conversation about what's going on in the real estate industry right now. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, Ashley, just give us a little bit about your background and how you got into being a real estate attorney in particular.
Sure. So I am one of those weirdos that knew they wanted to be an attorney from the time they were 8. It has been my only goal in life. So I went the traditional route, got my undergrad at San Diego State in business, and then went to law school. And I actually wanted to be a sports agent. So a lot of my education was based around working with athletes in sports law. And in law school, I realized that probably wasn't the right path for me, but I knew that I still wanted to work with athletes and high net worth individuals. And so I thought, how can I maintain this client base without working as an agent? And that led me into real estate transactions because a lot of people who have disposable income are investing in real estate. And so I just followed that path. And here I am today representing everyone under the sun as they delve into real estate investment.
That's super interesting. And you mentioned investment. So for you, you're working more in commercial real estate, in real estate where somebody's bought something as an investment as opposed to as a personal residence.
There are, the offshoot where I do get involved in a personal residence purchase, but that's
Sure.
usually because something has happened. I
Right.
would say 99% of the times, the brokers and agents representing the parties are more than capable of getting them to the finish line. So on a residential, personal residence purchase, I'm usually involved only in the instance where a problem has arisen.
And what kind of problems arise, just out of curiosity?
Um, a lot of times it's, miscommunication with the broker,
Mm-hmm.
especially if the broker's double ending the deal.
Oof.
That can cause some conflict where the buyer or seller feels like they need their own individual voice speaking for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've seen a lot of undisclosed solar liens post
Mm-hmm.
closing
Oof.
when the new buyer gets hit with that property tax bill and doesn't expect that huge lien on there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of construction related issues,
Mm-hmm.
title issues,
Mm-hmm.
so things like that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting to talk about a few things. One thing, just for the general audience that's listening, I personally don't believe that dual agency should be legal. That's where I'm at. In 27 years of doing real estate at this point, I've done it 3 times. And all 3 times, by the way, this will crack you up, Ashley, they were all attorneys. And they kept on trying to rewrite all my contracts. So I went to the
Mm-hmm.
sellers and said, look, I'll discount my services if you'll just let me handle the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really sticky wicket when an agent is representing both sides, because how do you remain a fiduciary to both the seller and the buyer? Your entire goal when you're working with a buyer is to get them the best house possible for the least money possible. Your entire goal when you're working with a seller is to get them the best deal possible where they've made the most money with the least hassle possible and the fewest concessions possible. Those two things do not intersect well. They're in fact, they're antithetical to one another, which is the whole reason why it's important to have a real estate agent on both sides so that somebody can talk to both their specific agent and feel like they've been heard. So that's one thing. And then this thing about solar leases, Another note to the viewing audience, you should really look at that. Whenever you're purchasing a property that has solar, make sure it's owned rather than leased. And if it is leased, get on it like immediately during the transaction, because what happens when these things don't get worked out and get discovered a week before close of escrow, the solar company does not work that fast. It's going to extend your escrow by 3 to 5 weeks, seriously, and it will be problematic because the terms and the way in which they've done things don't necessarily jibe with the way a real estate transaction works. So really be cautious about that. Those are two really good things that you just brought up. Um,
Thank you.
um, so Ashley, in your journey as a commercial real estate attorney, are you handling gigantic leases? Are you handling purchases of 10 unit plus multi-unit buildings? Are you handling things out of state, getting involved with REITs and things like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. As the real estate market shifts and as interest rates change and as prices go up, my job changes.
Yeah.
So when I first started doing this, it was a lot of, ground up construction in Southern
Hmm.
California. That
Hmm.
doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
So currently I'm doing a lot of like single family purchase flips to multifamily.
Hmm.
Um, so anywhere from 4 to 400, obviously
Hmm.
not on a single family property, but
Right.
that's, multifamily is kind of big right now. I'm
Hmm.
doing a lot of retail purchase,
Okay.
leasing there, not a lot of office. I'm
Hmm.
sure as we can all understand, post COVID, office isn't really booming.
I know.
Um, and yeah, a lot of syndication with interest rates the way that they are. People are going private funding for their development projects. So that's
Right.
really kind of the bulk of my practice.
I would guess. I would guess. And I'm here in Berkeley, California, where we have absolutely draconian rent control. What is the
Hmm.
rent control like in San Diego? Do they have it?
We do have it. It's inapplicable to newer construction, so that doesn't help because there's a
Hmm.
lot of new construction here. But post COVID, San Diego went further than California's regulations on terminating existing leases for those
Hmm.
individuals that did want to hike up their rent. There are
Hmm.
very specific, as I'm sure you know, reasons you can terminate a lease for a
Hmm.
no fault termination.
Hmm.
The state of California requires 1 month of rental moving assistance. San Diego
Hmm.
increased that to 2 months. So they're
Okay.
doing a lot to protect their tenants.
Yeah, in Berkeley, basically you get a tenant and you're an indentured servant for life to them. So it's a very
Yeah.
different thing.
Yeah.
They're even trying to repeal Costa-Hawkins, which is what allows a single family home to be exempted from rent control. So
Hmm.
you could have a lot of situations in Berkeley coming up where, let's say, a professor goes to Europe for sabbatical for 9 months, has a very specific lease saying they're going to come back, and the person who's in their house goes, "I like this place. I think I want to stay."
Hmm.
We're in that sort of a situation where these kinds of things are going to start coming up more and more. I feel like our jobs get more and more complicated, and I feel like a lot is asked of real estate agents in the state of California. Since we are not attorneys, nor do we pretend to
Hmm.
be, well, some people pretend to be them, and that's a very bad thing.
I 100% agree with you. I say all the time, I don't pretend to be a real estate agent. I hope they don't pretend to be an attorney.
Yeah, exactly. I read these things sometimes that come across my desk in contracts where it's really obvious that the agent has tried to write something as if they're an attorney, thinking that they're writing legalese, which they're not. They're just writing something that's very unclear and incomprehensible in one way or another. And it always ends up having to get unraveled and ends up getting simplified to the point where everyone understands what the person is trying to communicate. But in any
Hmm.
case, or sometimes it doesn't, and then you got a problem. Um, so in your work, how affected is the commercial industry at all by the most recent NAR DOJ lawsuits and the commission lawsuits?
I haven't seen a huge impact just
Hmm.
because, the commercial space is so different from residential. There isn't a lot of crossover with agents.
Right.
So they've kind of operated differently since the
Forever.
beginning. Right.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen a huge impact in that. I know all of my residential friends were really scared about the change, and I think people adapted quickly and
Hmm.
efficiently.
Hmm.
So I can respect the adaptability of these agents with this new ruling. But yeah, in the commercial space, I haven't really seen too much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I stay in my lane, frankly, so I don't know a lot about doing commercial real estate. I've sold some major apartment buildings through happenstance, but I've never done anything that was purely commercial. There was always a residential element to it.
Yeah.
Um, and another question I have, and way back when I was thinking about becoming a real estate agent, I looked into being a commercial agent because I thought, oh, well, if you can sell a house for, this is going to date me, $100,000,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you can sell a 10-unit apartment building for, a million. Wow, why not go into the one where you sell for a million? But then I looked around and I saw that there were very, very few women doing commercial real estate. And to this day, it's still very, very few women doing commercial real estate. There are more of them, but it's not like in real estate where, what is it, something crazy like 69% of real estate agents are female. How do you feel as an attorney your being a woman has affected you in this field?
So it's an interesting thought because it took me about 6 months to realize I haven't talked to a woman in a really long time professionally. And then I'm always the only woman in the room.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is rare. I don't know how I ended up here, but I'm here and I'm representing. And I've had some very inappropriate and interesting conversations with men who are used to working in a male-dominated field. I'll give you an example. I was in a full day mediation. This was actually one of my residential cases. A husband and wife had acquired a pretty massive real estate portfolio.
Hmm.
And the wife had done some fraud,
Ooh.
and there were loans that the husband wasn't aware of. And in this case, she was trying to sell one of the properties without him knowing. And so when the notary was at their house with the grant deed, he goes, "What do you mean we're selling this house? I didn't approve of this."
Oh my
But his
God.
signature was on all the escrow documents and the purchase and sale agreement and everything. So it was quite a bit of fraud. Long
Whoa.
story short, the family had an arranged marriage. And the mediator asks me, "Well, you're a young, pretty girl. How do you feel about an arranged marriage?" And I just looked at him. I said, "After this, are you going to ask my counterpart how he feels about an arranged marriage, or is this just a question?"
Oh my Lord.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
then
was
did
like,
he
"We're
pat you on the head?
right." I mean, we're here talking about serious misconduct. I'm there
Mhm.
representing the husband. I'm, the innocent party in this transaction and continue to be objectified strictly because I'm the only woman in the room.
Yeah. Oh my Lord. That's
Yeah.
horrible.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine. I've grown thick skin throughout this process, and I play it to my advantage. People don't expect me to come in as prepared and educated as I am,
Hmm.
and it works to my client's benefit because I'm able to negotiate things that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise get if the other side was prepared coming into the transaction.
You're like Elle Woods.
A little bit. Just I do have a little dog, so maybe more than I imagined.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So how long have you been practicing law?
So I have been in practice for 8 years. I started my own practice just shy of 3 years ago,
Hmm.
and I have loved every minute of it.
That is marvelous. That is absolutely.
Thank you.
I love to see women succeeding, especially when they're trailblazing in areas where not that many have gone before. All of the real estate attorneys that I know here in the Bay Area, there are only two that I know that do any business that are women. And most of the rest are guys and they have big firms, what have you. And most of them focus on tenant landlord law because our rent control stuff is where a vast majority of, as far as I can tell, a vast majority of the problems occur. I have noticed that there are a lot of buyer's remorse lawsuits occurring now because of what happened in 2021, where people paid way too much for properties because of the desperation coming out of COVID, I think, and also the low
Hmm.
interest rates that we had back then. Um, And so they're seeing more of those kinds of lawsuits where somebody wants to pick up two or $300,000 because they feel they've overpaid by that much. Are you seeing that in San Diego?
You know, not being in the litigation world, it's tough for me to say just because I wouldn't get those calls.
Right.
Um, I'm strictly transactional,
Oh,
so
awesome. Okay.
if it comes to a lawsuit, I am automatically refer those out.
Hmm.
San Diego, I think, was declared the highest real estate prices in the country at one point this year.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah, I think people are going to be upset. And I imagine that they're trying to get their money back as best they can.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I personally haven't seen it in my practice.
And when you are working with a major, do you see a lot of transactions where famous people don't want to be named and you're doing things by proxy?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work that I do with how I structure entities to make sure that the ultimate owner remains anonymous.
Hmm.
Um, I speak on behalf of the client, their agent will speak on behalf of the client.
Hmm.
Like 9 times out of 10, sellers won't even know who they're selling to.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And what are the safeguards put in place for something like that?
So without giving away too much, and again, in this instance, nothing that I'm saying is legal advice.
Of
Just need to give
course.
that little caveat.
Of course.
There are some
Big
states that
CYA, everyone. Big CYA. Okay, there you go.
there are some states that offer a lot more privacy with respect to publication of ultimate ownerships in
Hmm.
entities. California is as transparent as they come.
Hmm.
So if you're ultimately buying in California, we can set up holding companies outside of the state that funnel through into California where we don't have to publish.
Got
Um,
it.
the issue becomes when signing the grant deed if you're a seller,
Right.
right? Ultimately, you're going to know who's signing the escrow papers. So there's a lot of trust in independent third parties who can put their name solely in a managerial capacity to keep that anonymity. But
Got it.
if you pick someone who's a bad actor and they have ultimate control over your entity, there's an issue there. So it's a lot of blind faith.
Wow, that's good. That's crazy. Yeah, one time it's this is like so stupid. You will crack up at this, but I actually was representing a quarterback for the Raiders who had been brought in to, you know, into California from the South. He actually, I worked with him for about 6 months and then he broke his collarbone and actually got traded off of the team. So it never even came to fruition. But I didn't know who he was. And I just thought he was this polite Southern man with, and he always came with someone who I think was his agent. I wasn't sure. And we were looking around, and so I just am curious about how things like that go. We don't have a lot of very famous people. We have a lot of intellectuals and people that you would know for who are writers and what have you here, but we don't really get a lot of movie stars and big, huge sports people. So,
Yeah, there's some very heavy-handed NDAs that come into play.
so Ashley, what would your biggest advice be to a woman wanting to go into corporate real estate law?
Don't be afraid to be the only one in the room. Your voice is going to be louder than everyone's there, so go in confident, know your stuff, study up,
Mhm.
and you'll be surprised with the results that you get because it is very male dominated, and
Mhm.
just you being there throws people off.
Interesting. Interesting.
Hmm.
Oh, my goodness. Couple of other questions. If you were to say, well, can you tell me what your most complicated transaction was and how you managed to pull through it?
Sure. So it's obviously in the commercial space.
Yeah,
How familiar are you with 1031 exchanges?
very.
Okay. So just a brief explanation, 1031 exchanges, it's a part of the tax code that allows you to keep your tax basis moving from one property to the next, so long as you follow very specific rules. So this 1031 exchange was three partners who all wanted to exchange into three separate properties. So we basically had to do one 1031 three times. And
Wow.
so we had to calculate the exact percentage of the value so that it qualified. We had to identify within, we couldn't start it until, and as you know, the identification period is so short. And with,
Mm-hmm.
supply as low as it is, you have to be really careful in your timing when you start the clock, because if two of the three identified, it would blow the whole transaction.
Right.
So we had to be very careful with all of that. And, the paperwork times three, it was just, it was a lot, but we made it
I
through.
I bet. Now, there are things called reverse exchanges. And would that have possibly helped in the situation you were in?
It could have, based on their accountant's advice, they didn't want to do a reverse exchange. So,
And can you
you know,
explain for our audience what a reverse exchange is? I'm sorry, I should have thrown that in there.
that's okay. So, a 1031 exchange, you have to identify a property within a certain time and close within that time. A reverse exchange moves that time frame to the back end. So you can close and then handle the exchange after the fact.
Hmm. Great. And do you end up working very concretely with tax attorneys in these situations too?
I would
Or
say
just accountants?
in most of my transactions, it's just me and an accountant. Most of the people in the commercial space are seasoned investors. This is their business. So their accountant knows every in and out of every entity that they own, and their tolerance for working in the gray.
Hmm.
That's obviously not my call. My call is, here's the law, and then
Right.
they and their accountant decide where they want to fall within that. So I don't give tax advice. I defer always to an accountant. In a larger transaction like that 1031 exchange, we did call in a tax accountant just to make, or I'm sorry, a tax attorney, just to make sure
Right.
that we were doing everything by the book.
And if somebody, let's say in that exchange, somehow some of the calculations were off, what would have been the ramifications of that?
They would have paid capital gains on the difference, which in this instance would have been pretty significant.
Got it. Got it. Now, there have been recent changes to the 1031 exchange regulations, correct?
Yeah, it's just getting stricter and stricter.
That's what I
Um,
thought.
Yeah, and if you haven't done it before, please have an experienced professional help you through it,
Hmm.
because, dealing with the IRS and going through a full audit of how you got these financials, it's almost not worth it. So if you're considering one, even the agent, make sure the agent's gone through a 1031 before.
And is it enough to work with a 1031 exchange company, or should somebody, when it's a significant purchase, should someone be working with a real estate attorney who specializes in 1031 exchange?
My advice is always to have an attorney on call, right?
Hmm.
Our job is only to answer the questions you ask.
Hmm.
So I can be used as little or as much as you need me to be.
Hmm.
So I always think, have a real estate attorney in your back pocket just in case things are going a little crazy and you just want that, peace of mind. Hey, I'm doing this correct. You
Right.
can make that one phone call, or you want hand holding through the whole process.
Have you had good experiences with 1031 exchange companies? Because personally, I've had okay experiences, but they were not that helpful to my clients as far as information was concerned.
I think it's a different experience for me versus you when I'm involved and someone says, ask your attorney, right?
Hmm.
All the time. It doesn't
Right.
matter if it's something that they can help with or not. Oh, you have an attorney? Ask your attorney. I
Right.
think agents get a little bit more advice than I would in a situation. So when I ask a 1031 exchange company a question, like, well, you're the attorney, you should know.
Right. Actually,
So I
agents don't get that much help. They really, it feels like you're dealing with a title company, but you're not dealing with the title officer, you're dealing with the escrow officer, if that makes any sense.
it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of them
That
are associated with escrow companies here. I know that in where you are title and escrow separated?
No, we do them together. Well, they are separated, but generally in our transactions, we use the same company for both.
Great. Okay. Yeah. I've talked with some people from Los Angeles where they do separate that you can have an escrow company and a title company, or you will have
Yeah.
both of those.
Yeah, I prefer keeping it all in-house. We use the big names just so the more experience, the easier the transaction, right?
Yep.
If you think about it, you're going to save what, 0.5% on a fee, but going with someone that's newer in the game, for me, it's not worth the headache.
Yep.
Especially in these big commercial deals, just pay the fee and let's move on.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
Well, you are a sheer delight. I really,
Thank
really
you so
appreciate
much.
I appreciate the time that we've spent together. If I ever have anybody who is interested in your kind of services, I will send them your way. If someone wants
You.
to reach you, how can they contact you?
The easiest way is through my website. It's feuermanlaw.com, FEUERMANLAW.com. You can schedule time with me right on there. Happy to have a 15-minute conversation with anyone.
Awesome. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
All righty. Great. Well, you did really well. I think we had some interesting information there for people. I think I love bringing in the whole feminist aspect of it, and you're just a delight. So thank you very, very
Thank
much for
you.
that. All right.
Of
Take good
course.
care.
You as well.
And we'll be
Bye.
in touch to let you know when it's going to be available and you can use it anywhere you want. I think it'll be
Awesome.
decent advertising for you as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Realizations Podcast. I hope our conversation has shed light on the true essence of real estate and the people behind it. As we wrap up, I want to extend my gratitude to our listeners for their support and engagement. Your feedback drives the heart of this podcast, and I look forward to continuing this journey with you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing to the Realizations Podcast and leaving a review. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our message of positivity in the real estate industry. Until next time, remember to keep an open mind, embrace empathy, and always seek the good in every situation. I'm Andrea Gordon signing off from Realizations. See you next time.